Welcome back to the channel. If you've been following along, I've been wanting to get into some GPU testing, and no better time has it been to evaluate video cards. And you might think, why? You can't get any video cards right now. Well, that might be true. You can't get the current 50 series. It's very difficult to, thanks to the paper launch, limited supply. AMD's tried to help that with a little bit better supply, but even their cards are tough to get right now as of April 2025. And thanks to fake MSRP prices or the evolving MSRP, they're becoming more unaffordable. And even the 40 series is a little tough. And you might want to try some of the newer games or some of the more demanding games and be in a 30 series card. Well, I'm going to be doing a lot of testing and not long videos because there's a lot of good content creators out there that talk about good side-by-side comparisons and what to expect. This information is going to be what information do you need to know if you want to play Monster Hunter Wilds and have our RTX 3080. Well, Monster Hunter Wilds requires GTX 2060 Super, 8 gig of memory, or 8 gig of a Radeon 6600 or better. And so the short answer, can you play it with a 30 series card? Yes, you can. But what can you expect with a 30 series card? And can I enjoy the gameplay with a 3080? When I see other content creators put out information regarding this particular system, this particular GPU, I don't know how many systems they run it in. I can't tell, is that going to be what I can expect? Or is it vary from system to system based on the configuration, the amount of memory, that kind of thing? And I'm being very upfront. I've spent a lot of time in these benchmark tools, and I ran the test in potentially these 5 systems. Okay, so TestBench V2, it has a 14900 KF with 32 gig of memory. The Penthouse system was split up into 2 different setups. The first was the system with 32 gig of memory, and then I thought, I wonder if it matters if how much RAM you have. Does 64 gig improve my performance? So this is the same system, but I put 64 gig in it in 2 sticks of memory instead of 32 gig of 2 sticks of memory. And then system 4 is the SimRig. It has 64 gig of memory, but it's running an i9-14900KS, no longer a K. And so does the extra gigahertz, the 6.2 instead of the 6 gigahertz boost, incorporate into better gameplay, faster frame rates? Does it help? And then finally, the Office Rig, my best system that I have, is also a KS with 96 gig of memory. And do I need those kind of resources to improve? But it's all tested with a 3080. Okay, and then I've got my undervolt, my vidlock, and how I'm running my custom loops. Just if you want that information, there's a lot more information in my channel on how to keep these 14 gens cool and what configurations I tested. This is just a summary of the systems I used to plug the 3080 into. And before we get too deep, we want to make sure we understand how I've thought good frame rates would be represented. Ultimately, you need to at least have 60 frames per second, but that's still oftentimes not going to be good enough in high frame rates, gameplay, the first-person shooters, the very interactive, need to have delays at a minimum. It's ideal to have 80 frames per second or more. There's a lot of people that say they don't want anything less than 100. There's some options in here for 100, believe it or not, but it's ideal to at least have 80. One of the things is that you're going to find in Monster Hunter Wilds is that, and other content creators have spoken on this too, is that there's a video section that is not very challenging compared to the more gameplay-like scenarios when your character is running around and interacting with monsters and getting into cities. Those are lower frame rates and can, on average, is going to be about 10 to 15 frames per second lower than the beginning and the end. That kind of pads the frame rate a little bit. So that's why I really pushed more toward the 80, because sometimes if you even have 80, 85, it'll dip into the 60s. and you want that good frame rate, good response when you're actually fighting a monster, for example. And so frames per second is very subjective. So this is what I deem as acceptable um, settings. This will give you a good starting point and what to expect if you buy this game and are anticipating using it with a 3080. So when you're looking at 1080p, I worked with 4 of the systems, and I'm using the multiple systems because I thought maybe I might be able to change based on the hardware. I could change and increase my settings. As it turned out, the settings were pretty well matched. So it didn't, having the Office rig at 96 gig of memory and a KS didn't afford me the opportunity to run at ultimate settings versus the test bench that was a K and 32 gig of memory. It was roughly the same score and roughly the same average FPS. Surprisingly to me, if I'd have known that, I might have saved myself a whole heap of time. So anyway, you're in the 90s at 1080p. So it's a good option, but let's try 1440p. When you look at 1440p, we can do DLSS balanced, not quality settings. Quality settings was too demanding for 1440p for good frame rates. So you back the DLSS down to balanced with no frame generation or ray tracing. That's really not an option here in the 30 series anyway. Frame generation isn't possible. Now, I know that you can probably hack things and update things, but for the average user that's just going to plug the card in, install the game, and run it, this is what you can expect. And you end up in the 70s to 80s. So this really is likely your best option, and I like 1440p gaming. That's really the sweet spot. But if you're going to look at 4K, can you run this 3080 at 4K? Yes, but you're then needing to go to low settings. You got to drop the settings down to low with DLSS performance enabled, and then you can get in the 80s frame generation. Well, then that means in the tougher situations, you're going to drop your 10 to 15 frames per second, and sometimes you'll get some glitches. Sometimes you'll get some motion. So I'm not really thinking that you will enjoy gaming at this in 4K. I could be wrong. You can continue to drop the settings, but in order to get the best playable and enjoyable experience with an RTX 3080, I'd stick to 1440p or 1080 for your best combination of frame rates and graphic combination. So with that, good luck, enjoy the game, God bless.